I think if you're living your life with intention, you're doing enough of the right things the right way to get on that path, you're going to get there. But it is all about putting the work in on being deeply reflective and intentional about it.
Welcome to episode 230 of the Pathways to Success, where we have conversations with inspiring leaders about their business and keys to success. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have another great show in store for you today. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the Pathways to Success, Mark Sinatra, CEO at Aspen HR. Mark, welcome back to the Pathways to Success. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you. Episode 230, what's that? 213 episodes later after the first one, 17.
I know. What do you think of the new digs? We've kind of upgraded the production part, yeah?
No, office is awesome, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you back on, and we're all excited to hear from your insights today. So let's jump in and get to know you a bit. So you are currently the CEO at Aspen HR. So for some context, let us know, what is Aspen HR?
So we are known as a PEO, professional employer organization, that provides HR outsourcing, HR solution support, mainly to small, medium-sized companies that have anywhere from 5 to 200 employees. We have some clients that are larger, some clients that are smaller, but most of them are between 5 and 200, and they usually don't have an internal HR department. So we help them with, HR compliance, HR technology solutions, payroll processing, employee benefits as well. In fact, actually, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but we actually, several years ago, my last company, we used Headstorm on a project that involved an integration between like a timekeeping system and our HR platform. So you guys did a great job on that. So great to be back here.
Happy customer. Give it up for that, yeah.
I'll leave my Venmo in the credits. No, I'm just kidding.
So Aspen HR, appreciate the context. Yeah. What would you say kind of sets Aspen HR apart from other like companies? What makes you different and unique?
Well, our sole focus is on customer retention and customer satisfaction. It sounds kind of simple, but when you really look into it, a lot of our competitors are primarily focused on sales growth. And there's a fundamental difference between focusing your organization and your investment and your dollars and focused in terms of sales versus like client retention and client satisfaction. For us, it's all about white glove service. We need to retain 90 to 95% of our clients every year to be successful. Notice I didn't say anything about revenue growth or sales goals. At the end of the day, if we're serving our clients, then we've done our job. So what we've done more tangibly is we've really invested a lot in our client service model, our client service team. There are certain things that we provide to our clients that, a lot of our competitors don't, and that results in, I think a much more, kind of elevated, client experience that, has resulted in our, success so far. I personally have, run companies that have been on the Inc. 5000 list 7 times, and Aspen, this will be our 3rd year this year, on the growth list. So I think growth is really a result of just focusing and doing right by the client.
So given your philosophies and experience growing and running businesses, how do you spend your time and focus as CEO?
Well, I've always been more of, I would say, an externally focused CEO. So, spend a lot of time, in the market, promoting the brand of Aspen HR, more specifically, and as an example, even this month in June, I was just at 2 conferences focused on the investment management industry, which is a big industry and market for us. I moderated a panel last week, and then the week before, I ran a lunch workshop at another conference. So I like getting out there in the market. I like talking to prospective clients. I like talking to clients. I like setting the strategic direction and the goals of the organization. And then I really enjoy, working with my leadership team to make it happen.
So you're very hands-on, active out there, evangelizing the brand, working with prospective clients. So you're really out there. Very hands-on type of CEO.
Yes, yeah, definitely hands-on as it relates to, client retention, growth initiatives, keeping an eye on trends in the market, also working with some of our key vendors, and then also, of course, and most importantly, just communicating with our stakeholders and our board as well. So.
Okay. And you mentioned, of course, overseeing the strategy for Aspen HR. What do you see as the future for the business?
The future is to continue, doing what we're doing, and that's really, focusing on serving the needs of really two markets. So we serve the needs of the alternative investment funds. So think of a private equity fund, a venture capital fund, hedge fund. We're usually the PEO of choice for that industry. But a couple years ago, we also branched out and started serving the needs of portfolio companies, so companies that are owned by private equity and venture capital funds, and that's really been a big catalyst of our growth. So we're going to continue doing that. We're also going to obviously stay very on top of emerging trends out there in the market, which I'm sure you guys are doing a lot of work in the AI field, and so we're keeping on top of how AI is going to impact our world internally and how we can leverage that to run more efficiently, and then externally, how we can leverage AI to make the client experience more efficient and more effective. So,
what kind of opportunities are you seeing in your space for AI?
Several. So I would say internally, there are certainly opportunities to automate or to basically simplify workflows that today are manual in nature. So I believe, I don't think AI, at least for our business, is going to at all replace any employees, but it would actually make their jobs a lot easier, and it'll increase the capacity for our some of my team members to do more with the same amount of time. I think from a client perspective, it's interesting, AI has been, out there for some time now, particularly as it relates to, using AI in recruiting. And, we don't really do recruiting per se, but we do offer an applicant tracking platform that can really help, screen and make more efficient the whole, sourcing and candidate screening process. So that obviously that's one area, but there's a lot of other areas that when you dig into HR compliance and things like, coming up with, a job description for a new position, something like that, back in the day would have taken, several hours to do it correctly. But nowadays, with different tools out there, that can be a pretty efficient thing. So we're just trying to figure out exactly, again, how to leverage technology to, be more of a thought leader within our space and to provide more value, to our clients.
Interesting. I know a company who can help you with that.
Please let me know. I don't know. I'm still no.
So, Mark, before we jump into your story and kind of learn about what's been going on with you for the past few years, anything else worth mentioning about Aspen HR?
I think we were one of those companies that we started 7 years ago, and I came on about 3.5 years ago. It's interesting. We grew a lot during COVID, and as a result, we're a remote company. I'm based in Dallas. We're based in technically in the Bay Area, but we have clients and I have employees all over the country. And it's interesting. My last company was very much like an in-office company, here based just down the highway here in Dallas. And so there's definitely pros and cons associated with it. But I think our setup has enabled us to, hire more quickly, serve clients as they have expanded, across the country as well. So, I would say, we're, if there's anything you want to take away from it, we're at the end of the day, we're just very committed to the white glove, service model and, serving the needs of our clients. That's our only focus day in and day out.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. So let's jump into the topic for today. So the reason why I was a bit moved from the last time that you and I met when we had lunch, it's because you shared with me something personal that I don't think you've actually spoken publicly about, but you have had a personal health journey that caused you to refocus on living with more intentionality. So please take us to the beginning. How did this all start?
Yeah, so you're right. I haven't, don't think I've spoken publicly about it. Certainly I've gotten more comfortable, talking about it, in recent years or certainly recent months. But long story short, about 2.5 years ago, just kind of randomly like started feeling like more fatigued, just didn't really know, like, I mean, that could be anything, right? But didn't really know what was going on. And then one night, I was kind of hanging out and, felt some swollen lymph nodes on, right around on my neck. I was like, let me get this checked out. Who knows, like what this could be. Got some labs done from my primary care, and it was quite amazing. Like from that time to when I was diagnosed, how quickly everything happened. But I ended up getting diagnosed with this acute form of leukemia. And it, again, kind of came out of the blue. Now, I was always one who, I would get checked out like once a year, right? Like to the doctor, get the labs done. At that point in time, I was actually coming due for my annual physical anyway. This was in February of 2022 is when this happened, early February. So again, I was kind of due anyway to kind of get my annual physical, but this really kind of like obviously accelerated me getting my labs done, getting checked out, and it was just quite a shock to the system. I would say, to say the least. At that time, I would say I thought I was being healthy. I was like, exercise a couple of days a week. But I will say, looking back, there were certainly things that I could have done, I would say to be in, better shape, or, eating more healthy, or not having, a glass of wine, like several nights a week. I mean, I could have like been much more intentional, right, about my health. And truth be told, I have no idea, what actually was the root cause of it. I mean, I think, not to digress, but I think it's a big challenge. I think today with medicine overall. I mean, our system is designed to do a very good job of treatment, but it's really, it's a struggle sometimes to understand like what the root cause is of, certain diseases and ailments. And in my case, like I said, I could drive myself crazy trying to figure out like what caused it, but I never will really figure it out. And so I'll get to this point later, but it has really kind of changed my whole perspective on being much more intentional and controlling what I call controlling the controllables about how, I live my life day in and day out. But going back, I went through a period very quickly from the time I was diagnosed to when I was treated. It was about a week from when I was in, my doctor's office getting the labs done to when I was actually in the hospital, getting chemo, because it was one of those like, you kind of wanted to treat it very quickly because it was an acute form of what I had. And so I began a series of, 5 pretty intense, chemotherapy treatments in, the hospital, 3 to 4 days each time, about a month apart. And it all eventually culminated in what's known as a bone marrow transplant, which I really had no idea what that was, prior to this, coming down with leukemia. But unfortunately, the type of, leukemia I had, this was really the best, certainly the best chance for me to have any sort of like a long-term path to life and to living. And so that was my choice. Thankfully, the bone marrow transplant, and just to be real transparent, my background, so, my mom is from Korea, my dad is, he's, Caucasian, but, it certainly helps to have like a similar, background, when you have a match in the global database. But to be honest, there's not a lot of, half Korean, half white folks, that are in the database for these bone marrow transplants. So luckily, I've got a younger brother who was a good enough match for me to kind of go through the bone marrow transplant. If it wasn't for him, there were some alternative, options for me that could have very well led to success. But, like I said, at least for the transplant, my brother was my only option. So I went through that. It was actually, I just celebrated my 2-year, they call it a rebirth day. So I just celebrated my 2 years. It was actually Monday this week.
Wow.
So it was 2 years since the transplant. And I will tell you, like, going through the transplant was really grueling. They give you this chemo that just kind of wipes out your whole system. Because they want, everything, all the bad stuff wiped out, so then, the fresh, healthy bone marrow can be put in. And then the recovery is certainly processed. I mean, honestly, it was like a several weeks, several month process to get my immune system, to get my strength and my energy back. But I'll tell you, I would say starting about 7 months after the transplant, I started kind of feeling, quote unquote, normal again in terms of like having the energy, doing what I was doing, prior to getting sick. Certainly like every month since then has really gotten, so much better to the point where, certainly today, like, I feel great. In fact, in a lot of ways, I'm actually much healthier than what I was prior to going through it. But yeah, the whole experience has really changed, again, my whole, perspective certainly on life and even like week to week, day in, day out, where I spend my time and how I spend it.
Wow. So what is your current state today? Like, are you free of it? Like, where are you at right now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's funny. It's interesting you ask that because I usually I accidentally leave that detail out, although everybody always kind of asks me. Obviously, it's important. So I got into remission very quickly, just so you guys know. It was actually about 60 days after my initial treatment is when I got into remission. But, this thing's a little tricky. So, you can have like even like one or two cells and that could be bad cells and then they could replicate. So, you got to be real sure that there's, no chance of relapse. But thankfully, I've had zero relapse. I've been in remission for over 2 years now at this point. Wow. It's everything's been good so far.
Dude, congrats with that for Thanks. Sure, man. So like when you first got the initial diagnosis, like how did that hit you? What was going through your head? How did that affect you mentally, emotionally? Like, what happened?
I think basically it's one of those situations where, at least for me, like I was like, went immediately into like, okay, how do I get over this? And you're not really thinking deeply about the meaning of life and reflecting on it. You're just like in the battle, right? And you kind of check it off. And I knew that I had these 5 treatments I had to successfully get through. And it was just like one after another, kind of check it off. And thankfully, I had a really, really good, support system with my family. I've got a lot of family here local, my wife, my friends. And so they were a huge part of, how I was able to get through this.
So quit was not even in the beginning. It was just like, what's the issue? What are the steps to get over this? And you just plowed forward. Yeah, and sometimes I can tend to overly simplify things, so I don't want it to come across like that. But that it really was like the sole focus on just, doing what I could to get through it. There's certainly, I don't know, like some luck involved in that for sure. But I figured if I could just focus as much as I could on just getting to the next phase, that you just had to have like, the inner belief that, I would come out, on the other end okay. So having gone through that, how now do you live your life differently? Let's start to shift the conversation that way. Yeah, it's a really good, and that's really the main goal of why I wanted to do something like this today. It has changed certainly like my perspective on where I spend my time and how I spend it. And don't get me wrong, I still I work, I think, very hard and I'm very focused on, being successful professionally. I will say I am very intentional about certain things in my life that perhaps before were maybe negotiables, with my time. More specifically, I think it kind of varies a little bit, but I would say like on a given week, I'll have some sort of physical activity or exercise, at least, 5 to
times a week and sometimes every day. And for me, it's a way to feel good mentally, physically, and again, it's controlling what's under my control going forward. I think before, it would be one of those things like, okay, if I had something to do, or if I felt tired, or if I could use any excuse in the book, but I'd say, maybe I don't feel like, exercising today, and just like forget about it. But now I really hold myself accountable to doing that. I think more importantly is just spending time with loved ones, family, my daughter, my wife, friends, and just like blocking out time. And it's not just like the time, it's also being very present during that time. I think of, how many instances before when, okay, be hanging out, but my phone would be like, right there, I'd be checking, see if there was like a text or an email. Certainly, if obviously you hear a head storm, you gotta be, on top of that, so don't get me wrong. But you get the point. I mean, like, after hours though, like just, it's healthy to kind of like reset and to really, disconnect. And so I found myself, even if like my phone was just present, that in my mind, I wouldn't be like fully present mentally. And so nowadays, and I still I'm not by all means like saying I'm perfect at all, but I am more cognizant of being present in the moment.
So what have been some of the most impactful routines or habits that you have implemented that has actually moved the needle in helping you live more intentionally?
I think, every week I look at my week, the following week. And, it's just like this, I think everybody does in terms of like just seeing what you have in your calendar. But that time, that intentional time, that proactive time, in the past, I would never really like, schedule it out or really reserve it. I would just leave like open blocks of time, and but nowadays I do make an effort to like reserve time in my calendar for those activities that I was referring to. And what's the trade-off? Well, I'm spending more time, investing in myself. I'm spending more time with my family and my loved ones. But on the flip side, like today, like I started working at like 6:30 in the morning. And so still have to like find a way to like do the job well. But I think what has kind of gone away is like the kind of the downtime. I mean, it's good to relax and like just, read or, watch TV or whatever. But like I'm fine that I'm doing less of that nowadays than what I was doing, in the past. Because I'm just trying to like optimize my time going forward. So every week is a rhythm and a practice that I go through. I'm just looking at the following week.
So it sounds like you're just very maniacal about the choices that you make and how you spend your time, and also how your state of being is in that time that you are being fully present. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, and it's evolving. Again, it is not easy to do, but that's my goal, is to do exactly what you just said.
So what's your advice for our audience in attendance here? For those who want to live more intentionally but don't know how to start, what would you say to them?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think I'd have to say, Faisal, summarized it, before really, really well in terms of like thinking about, like just what those important, priorities are. Even like going through an exercise of just reflecting on, your own personal values. Like what are those values, and why are they meaningful to you? And then coming up with a way for you, like every month, to reflect on, well, where did I spend my time in the last month in regards to, these values? An example would be, if you hold a value that, okay, quality relationships, with friends and family is a value of yours. what would be a goal for you for like the next 30 days for you to live that value out? An example of that could be, well, I'm going to call 2 of my friends that, I don't know, I went to high school with or I went to college with that I haven't talked to in a while, right? Things that, are probably like, if you're not really thinking about it and being intentional, you'd probably fall by the wayside, but could be very fulfilling to you, and it could be very consistent with like living that value out. And, it's a practice, it's like, you're kind of walking the talk. And so you have this log every month of, well, did I really walk the talk? Did I live out, those values that I laid out, for myself? I think is one piece of advice I would have.
I think that's might be the biggest thing. So Mark and I have known each other for a while, and even though I think we're similar in age, I always have seen him as a mentor. And every time I'd ask him for business advice, he'd always go back to that, like, what are your values? And I'm like, Mark, I just want to know, how do I make money? How do I do the business? And he goes, you got to keep going back to your values. And the reason why I resonate with that so deeply, it's because you can do a bunch of things that you think you want to do, but unless you do the hard work of really figuring out what you want in life, then it acts as a kind of a GPS or a decision-making mechanism for you to choose the things that are actually in alignment with your values. But you got to figure out what that is. And in my experience, you don't choose your values. They're kind of rooted, right? They're kind of there. And until you maybe make the right decisions or wrong decisions, you begin to feel that thing like, oh, this is not important or whatnot. So what's your best advice for our audience to discover what their actual personal values are?
That's a good question. Before I get to that, similar age group, thank you. I don't know where you got that from, but it's
are we not?
very, very kind. That is a really good question. I mean, I think like, you just have to, and again, like not to overly simplify, just like figure out like what's important to you, but be real about it. Like just, don't try to come up with a value that, you think is going to sound good, but at the end of the day, like, if you're being real with yourself, like you really don't like ultimately like devote a lot of time to it, and you don't want to. So, I think it involves, some uninterrupted time of like reflection, and maybe also talking with like, some family and friends about that as well, and sharing, some of what you come up with in terms of, what your values are. But I think in this era, of, like technology and like, social media, streaming, everything else. I mean, it's like, I think uninterrupted time where you're disconnected it's like gold. It's like so valuable. And, I think having that time to like just deeply reflect, in terms of what's important to you is probably the route I would go.
So some introspection and spending time, because sometimes you might think you have a value, but after you spend some time with it and do things, you're like, that's not really that important. I remember there was an exercise you told me, you said just Google personal values, and you'll probably find like a set of like 50. And then you try to narrow it down to 25, and then try to narrow it down to 5, and then 10, right? Until you find like the top 3 things that you actually value in life. And if you live in accordance with whatever those 3 things are every day, even if you don't have the specific outcome you're trying to receive, right? You're kind of in a blissful state. You feel fulfilled because you're living your values. You're not tied so much to the outcome. You're just in that present state of living in your values. And I think that's a way of achieving success without being a billionaire or always moving the benchmark in terms of success. And that's why I thought that was really important, man. One other thing you said also is very key once you begin to determine your values is to know where the end zone is. What does that mean for you?
The end zone, like, the North Star, right? So like, what are you, at the end of the day, like, what are you striving for personally, professionally, like, and just look at it like, 10 years and, but working your way back as well, because, there's a famous quote, I think it was like Bill Gates, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I mean, a lot of people, a lot of companies tend to, have these like, really audacious goals, but like think about like the steps in terms of what is it going to take for you to really get there and plot it out. Again, that's like work-wise and personally as well, and just make it happen. Keep yourself accountable to making sure you boil the plan down to these bite-sized steps that are within reason, for you to ultimately get to, your North Star. I think for me, I didn't really know. I think it was when I was in business school is when it dawned on me that ultimately I wanted to run a company. But, for years up until that point, I really didn't have a good sense. But it wasn't until I was, for me, in that environment, business school around other, a lot of other friends and colleagues, but also taking classes and things that I'd never, studied before. It kind of showed me a whole different way of, part of business. And before then I'd worked in, consulting and in corporate finance, but I knew I wasn't really, fulfilled for the long term there. So anyway, for me, I didn't really know what my North Star was for quite a while until I had opened myself up to trying new things and exploring, new concepts.
So trying different things, exploring new concepts, putting yourself out there, and then over time you begin to feel an intuition about yourself, kind of thing. Yeah. Cool. Well, Mark, close us out. What's the best piece of advice you can give our audience in attendance or viewers online? What's the best advice you can give everyone to live more intentionally so that they can be more productive, happy, and fulfilled?
I think it goes back to, and this is actually a question I ask sometimes when I interview, job candidates, professionally. I want to get a sense of when they were, happiest in their last job. What were they doing that really kind of brought a smile to the face, where they felt good about what they accomplished. And so I would just challenge everybody to ask yourselves of that from a personal perspective. Thinking about activities, where you spent your time, how you spent your time on what you really enjoyed doing and why you enjoyed it, and how you can do more of that. Again, it just comes down to just really thinking just deeply about that uninterrupted time, and challenging yourself too, because there could be things that you've enjoyed doing that maybe you haven't devoted enough time to, and then really kind of taking those measures in place in your life to just spend more time doing that.
I think that's great advice. So Mark, final question here for you. The show is called Pathways to Success. Having had this odyssey that you've gone through over the past few years and have literally faced your mortality, what is your definition of success today?
I think, definition of success is just certainly being happy, fulfilled, in all aspects of life that are important to you. And that is really, it varies by the person, right? It's not this one universal definition. But I think if you're living your life with intention, and you're doing enough of the right things the right way to get on that path, you're going to get there for sure. You're going to have that pathway to success, to fulfillment. But it is all about putting the work in on being deeply reflective and intentional about it.
I think that's really awesome, great advice, and an awesome definition of success. So, Mark, thank you for coming back on the show and sharing your story with us. If you would, tell our audience straight into this camera how to connect with you, follow you, support everything that it is that you do.
Sure. If I can be of help, feel free to reach out to me. Email me at mark with a K at aspenhr.com, and happy to help.
And we'll make sure all your contact information is in the show notes as well. So, Mark, it's been a privilege to have you back on the show, man.
Thanks, Julian. Appreciate it.
And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.